Yeah, so I've got your beautiful book here. I'm really excited to read it. Thank you for bringing it to us. What was your inspiration? What inspired you to
Mm.
write this?
Yeah, I think it was quite a few things, really. The main thing for me is as a therapist, as a neurodivergent therapist working in that field, I really found there was such a huge gap between how we're trained as counsellors and therapists and coaches and everything too, compared to how our neurodivergent clients really need us to be in the therapy room. And I think when I came to this, when I came to counselling, and I was looking for books because I had like my very first client was autistic. So I felt quite unprepared going into that. And I looked for books and I looked for training, and there just wasn't anything to sort of help me with it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do a deep dive on this. Me being autistic and ADHD, I was like, right, I'm into it. I'm going to do all of this. And like from that came my training and things like that I did for other people. And then it seemed a natural kind of progression to do the book. And the idea is that it's not coming from like many of the books that we've had before for particularly autism, but also ADHD as well, are like come from the kind of so-called experts,
Mhm.
and it's very much an us and them kind of thing in the book. Like I found it was often the experts kind of talking about this is how you should treat them in the room, this is what we should do for this person, this is how we should solve this problem for them, and that just really didn't align with my way of working. So yeah, hopefully the book is kind of that for other people, and the book that I would have wanted, I guess, when I was first out of training.
It's being the expert in the field without feeling like in a patronizing or a way of that this being neurodivergent is a problem and issue as well,
Totally.
which is makes it more relatable.
Totally. Yeah, because a lot of those books are based on the medical model, which is that kind of idea of autism is a disorder. It's you're flawed, you've got deficits, attention deficits, or social communication deficits. And actually, there is a whole other model that you can use, a whole other shift that you can do towards neurodivergence and seeing it as just a neutral difference. It's just a difference. We're just different and we express ourselves and we perceive the world in different ways. And like I think that should be embraced, and as counselors, and I know like in the work you do, we're really there for the person in front of us holistically, and we're not about shaming that person or trying to fix them in any way. So we're there for them, and I think that's where this kind of model, the more affirming model, really aligns with the way that we work as like well-being practitioners.
Yeah, and lived experiences. So what's worked for you, and that you're able to
Mm.
share that as well to somebody else. And so the fixing, it's actually this is what works. This is how we cope in this world, which
Mm.
is really powerful. So why now?
Yeah, I think the reason why now is like the main reason is it's just felt so needed because there just hasn't been the resources, the books available like this. And like I'm thankful there's a lot more neurodivergent therapists now, a lot more people coming into the space and writing books. So this is like, which is fantastic. But as I said, there just wasn't anything. And I think I got to the point in my career where I was training other therapists, I was seeing people in supervision, and really hearing that other counselors, other therapists really had a thirst for that knowledge. They really wanted to embrace this kind of new way of looking at things or looking at autism and ADHD, but they didn't have the tools to do it. They didn't have that education, and it was a bit of a minefield for people in terms of what training they could get, or how good the training would be. So it's really felt vital, and also because like the world we're living in at the moment and the way things seem to be going, certainly like in America and somewhat over here in the UK, I'm so passionate that this is the information that needs to get out there
Yeah.
so that I think neurodivergent clients or neurodivergent people are properly supported, and yeah.
So tell me a little bit what's going on in America and what's not aligning, and
Yeah.
what difference can this make then, just so people understand that a bit
Yeah.
more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think what's happening now is we've got a movement towards positioning things like ADHD and autism as a bit of a trend, like the idea that people are jumping on the bandwagon, that they're seeing things on TikTok and they're going, oh yeah, that's me, I'm ADHD, or oh yeah, my kid must be ADHD, I need to get a diagnosis so I can get benefits. There's like this idea that people are going through the ridiculous waiting list, the time that it takes to get an autism ADHD diagnosis, the thought that parents, for example, would be doing that and doing all the mountains of paperwork just to get some benefits at the end of it. It's really short-sighted, I think. But that's the kind of narrative that we're being given.
Yes, I read an article yesterday. The headline was uh, the headline was people with dyslexia and ADHD allowed to skip airport queues and sip champagne in VIP lounges. We're allowed to sip champagne.
Wow.
I mean, how that's just so terrible, which is great. I'll have to do that on Friday then. Just bypass everything and
go and sip your champagne while everyone else is queuing up. Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? And obviously that headline, like whatever that publication is, have maybe got their own agenda, like I'm guessing. But it really is this narrative of like, look what these people are getting over there, and this is really unfair, and those people are getting benefits, or these people are getting extra time in exams or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas the reality, all we're doing is leveling the playing field, because being in an airport, for example, like that, is so stressful for many autistic people, ADHD people, other neurodivergent people. It's so stressful, it's debilitating, it might stop us going, it might cause a meltdown, it might cause us to shut down. And yeah, it prevents us from doing what we want to be doing or what we should be able to do. So all we're doing with this, with whatever the accommodations that are being made in an airport, is leveling that playing field, making it slightly more accessible. And if you think about articles like that, the more we as neurodivergent people see articles like that, we're going to think, oh, we're not welcome to take up those accommodations, we're not able to do that, oh, I've got to mask more, I've got to put myself under more pressure to act in a less neurodivergent way to fit in with everyone else's idea of things. And that's what historically we've always had to do. And it causes so much shame and so much trauma for people that when really we want to be embracing difference, right? We're just different people, we just experience things different ways, so why wouldn't we try and accommodate that? So I think the narrative coming from America particularly, but also over here, is just very much about how autism and ADHD is a fad, is a trend, is everyone's jumping on the bandwagon, we need to stop it, it's overdiagnosed. Whereas, as we know, as both late diagnosed people, we know that ADHD wasn't even recognised in women and girls. Autism wasn't picked up in girls. The research was all centred around boys, usually white boys. So that meant that girls, people of colour, other marginalised groups just didn't get picked up. So, of course, we're now, as we're understanding things a bit better, and how ADHD can present itself in women, how autism can present itself in women, now we understand that, we're catching up. So we've got generations of people who were never understood in that way, now finally able to get a diagnosis, or maybe just understand themselves just through self-identification. And so it's not an overdiagnosis at all, it's actually that it's been underdiagnosed and we're just playing catch up. So your question, after going on many tangents, the question is about why now, is because actually it's so important to get that message out there, particularly to the people who support autistic and ADHD people.
In that setting, because we've got all the years, like if it is more people have been diagnosed in the last, let's say, what, 7 years, 8 years has it been? So it is playing the catch up with, there isn't the therapy, Freud wasn't talking about this,
absolutely,
etc. So it's understanding it in a different way.
Well, that's one of the other things, that the counselling modalities and the approaches that we learn when we're in counselling training are all based on kind of westernized ideas back from when they were created. So Freud, you mentioned Freud, a white man, probably a very privileged white man, and many of the ideas, many of the thought leaders of the time were white male academics. And that has meant that because racism and sexism and ableism, all of that was embedded in the culture of the time, so are the modalities and approaches that we still use a version of today. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what's tricky for us as practitioners, is needing to understand that with the best will in the world, we can think about giving unconditional positive regard to all our clients, all our empathy, but actually if we're missing that person, and if we're missing their autism, we're missing their ADHD, we're missing something fundamental about them. And we really need to kind of look and go, okay, how does my approach align with these clients? Yeah. And how does it not? And what do I need to change? So the book is very much like, I didn't want it to be just a textbook. Yeah. It needed to be something that would take you on a bit of a journey. It's a bit of a cliche, but I think it does take you on a bit of a journey from learning the theory and the knowledge of neurodivergent traits, but through a lens that's a lot more compassionate than the one we're used to, through to what practical things can we use in the room. So what are the tools that I can use tomorrow with my autistic client, and how can I make sure that they feel embraced and welcomed and affirmed in my therapy room?
And understood.
Very much so.
Which is the story of the lives, of not feeling misunderstood.
Absolutely.
And it feels nice as well. Was that intentional?
Well, so we went back and forth over the cover. Yeah. So actually what I really wanted is something very clear, so that hopefully the font you'll see is like quite dyslexia friendly. Yeah. And inside is a really hopefully very easy to read way. Yes. Like I've put everything in chunks and into sections to hopefully help you kind of make your way through, because I know for me, I really do struggle with large passages of text. Yeah. And like I say, I was trying for it not to be like an academic textbook that is just so hard to read. Yeah. Because for me, being ADHD, I'll read a paragraph and then forget what I've read. Yeah. So I really wanted to chunk it up so that it makes it a little bit easier to digest, or you can dip in and out of it really.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. And I, probably meant to wear glasses, but I don't for reading, and I can see everything perfectly. And it's not jumping too much. That's good. So yeah, and the colour, even the colour, because I have the colour dyslexia. So yeah, it's really clear.
Yeah, and the publishers are really good. They're very neurodivergent friendly. Mm-hmm. They do loads on lived experience. They really centre lived experience. And it was a very neurodivergent friendly process for me as well, which was good. But yeah, I love the feel of it. I think and the smell of it. Like I always think, I like the smell of a new book. Yeah, me too. And just the tactile nature of it, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I definitely. It feels very. So for people, when you're holding a book, that is the joy, isn't it? Having a book, the joy of having that, the feel, the reading. So the whole experience of this, as well as it being educational, it meets the senses that we like.
Yeah, well. I hope so, because I think that's the thing. I mean, I'm a bit of a collector of books anyway, therapy books in particular, but I think having something that you can hold, like it's great that we've got internet and loads of kind of information at our fingertips, but there's nothing like, I think, actually being able to hold it and read it and dip in and out of it when you need to sort of say. So there's a chapter in there that's frequently asked questions near the back, and it's all questions that sort of therapists have asked me in training or in supervision or what have you. And it will be things around maybe neurodivergent relationships. It'll be things around how do we treat, or how do we help autistic and ADHD clients with our endings in therapy. It might be about food and neurodivergence. Like there's lots of kind of questions in there that I pose and then discuss. So yeah, for that reason, so that you can dip in and out and go, okay, I've got this client that's having this particular thing, or even personally, if you're personally having something that's going on for you, you might be interested in some of those questions, and you can just dip in and out.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, because it's really important for therapists as well, who have maybe just been diagnosed, to then also understand themselves from this, and just as important, because you can be studying. I know when I was studying to be a counsellor, and undiagnosed with autism, and the setting was just so hard for me. So imagine the people training to be a counsellor now, and they'll be able to give this to their tutors, and this is just going to help so many spectrums of therapy, and for people to be able to work more harmonious together. Because if I had this book all those years ago, then it would have helped me so much to give to my tutors. Probably can't put that up.
Yeah. Well, there's also, so at the end of the chapter, so I really wanted, for exactly that reason, right? Because I'm an autistic ADHD therapist, and the books don't speak to me generally. There are a couple of new ones out now which are just starting to talk about what it's like to be a therapist with neurodivergence. But at the end of every chapter, I've got a section that is for the neurodivergent therapist. And that was deliberately to make sure that it was as inclusive as possible. But so we could look at, okay, what are the specific challenges that relate to that chapter, challenges and strengths for someone who's neurodivergent. So if we've been talking about rejection sensitivity, say in the chapter, what does that mean for the neurodivergent therapist? How do we cope when a client disappears or ghosts us? Or how do we cope when somebody, maybe we're having an email conversation with someone about an inquiry and then they just disappear, or maybe we get an email that doesn't feel particularly friendly or is quite difficult to navigate. Like maybe we're going to get triggered by that rejection sensitivity, and like that's really important for us to know as well for us. So so the idea was hopefully to include everyone, so we're not left out of the conversation.
That is so important. And because sometimes as neurodivergent, we can replay situations. So if let's say then you've been ghosted by a client, then it's the impact that can have when it really was nothing, but the way our brains will work and understanding that.
Completely. And I mean, well, you can imagine writing a book is like the biggest the biggest challenge for someone with RSD, because like, what are people going to think? And like, I've had lovely feedback so far, but like, I just will be triggered by the slightest thing, and I know that's my stuff, but it's just an incredibly hard thing to be able to cope with. So it's quite a vulnerable thing to be putting stuff out into the world, like, as you know, like it will be you're putting stuff out, you're doing stuff on social media, and it's really vulnerable.
It does create again big feelings when we put things out in public, and I can do that if I want to talk about certain things that I'm passionate about what prevents people really finding their core of them, and it can be a bit controversial. And then it's like, oh my God, I hope people don't think I'm an unkind person. I'm still, but it's like actually we can still, we're not being unkind. We're just stating things, but everyone will take things how they will. But if we keep hiding away, then no one will learn. Or
it's true, isn't it? And I think we naturally get triggered when we step out and we are being vulnerable because we're trying to be authentic. And I think that's difficult for everyone. But for autistic and ADHD people, we've had that lifetime of not being understood, feeling that people don't get us, maybe having our needs chronically unmet. So doing this kind of stuff, and even on, not a book or social media, it might even be a counsellor putting their advert out on a directory, their profile on a directory, or starting a website or whatever. Like those feelings that come up around that are also historical. So it's a really difficult thing, I think.
So what would let's say a neurodivergent therapist, and they are putting their profile up, what kind of feelings could that evoke without them really knowing?
Good question. I think it's so common to be really, really anxious, and that moment, I remember doing it for the first time, that moment you kind of push go live or whatever on it, submit, is really, really scary. You're in a sea of therapists, counsellors, and if you're new to the profession or you've got a new private practice, then you're feeling maybe inadequate, you're feeling like you're trying to compare yourself to everyone, and then here you are putting yourself out there. Who am I to do that, right? Who am I? like, oh no, I'm not good enough to do that. And so it can be, really anxiety inducing. And I think with RSD, rejection sensitivity disorder, rejection sensitive dysphoria, if I get it right, is a lot of shame. There's a lot of shame that comes up.
Yeah.
And again, like I say, maybe that's historical from all the times we felt we haven't got it right or that someone's misunderstood us. But shame is just so debilitating that it often stops us from doing stuff.
Yeah.
Because it's just so much. And like it's stored in the body, isn't it? With, your work, like, especially looks at that.
So what advice would you give to the therapist just about to embark and put out their work and and battling those feelings that we all know so well?
I think it's completely normal to have those feelings, and I'd want to validate those feelings, especially for the autistic and ADHD or other neurodivergent people amongst them, because of that history. So I want to really validate that and say that's such a normal experience. But at the same time, maybe it's taking the time to tend to those parts of you that are feeling that anxiety. So maybe it's a bit of self-talk rather than the self-critical voices we're so used to, many of us, saying, oh, you're rubbish, you can't do this, whatever. We want to try and counter that with some positivity as well, and saying, actually, it's all right, I'm here, I've got you. Like, we're not that young person anymore. I'm qualified, or I'm doing this, or I'm able to do this, and let's do it, kind of thing. That sort of cheerleader.
Yeah, and that's having those mantras to yourself are really important, because that's soothing our nervous system, regulating ourselves, nurturing ourselves, which when nobody else can, especially when you're a neurodivergent therapist, you feel like you should have it all together, but we still would have those old patterns, those old ways of being. By having that, the mantra, the self-talk is really important, and to know that it's okay to feel that way as well, that we all, even the most well put together person, will always be, but they're masking.
And that's something actually which is a really good point, because I think sometimes people see, I've written a book and I'm very proud of having written a book, but it doesn't come without difficulties. And I think sometimes people might see that and see, oh, she's doing all right, she can she can write a book or produce these things, but it's come with a massive amount of burnout or overwhelm, and it's a lot. And I think there's a lot that's come up for me in the writing of the book, to notice that these are things that are triggering me, whether it's RSD or whether it's just the sheer overwhelm of putting myself out there, or the actual writing process. It's been hard, right? It's really hard. And yet I am so used to masking that I think, I'll put on that face of like, oh yeah, no, I can do this. And I can do it. And I have done it. But yeah, it comes at a price too. And I kind of want people to know that's okay, and that having all of those feelings, whether you write a book or you don't, like, it's still incredibly hard work, just existing and doing what we're doing.
And that passion though for you to help others, because you know what it was like to have the experience of not having the tools and the help. So you've had to you've learned, you're meant to have gone through all that, and this is where I'm always so thankful that we go through our experiences to be able to share that with others, so they don't have to have the same experience. So we're there to guide, and this is what this is there for, to help others have a much more relatable experience and book as their Bible, basically.
I hope so. And like I say, it was the book that I wished I'd had, and I could read and be seen in that. And so I very much wrote it for me as much as for anyone else.
I think it is that, I mean, I know what I need is, I love, but this then what we're used to. I'm like, I love a firm therapist. I like one that isn't gentle with me. I like a to the point, literal. Maybe the literal, but then that is, maybe that's where what I misunderstood with myself, what I needed in a therapist. I used to say I love the direct. I don't want to be don't want the person-centered maybe as much.
Yeah,
but is that because then I didn't understand? I needed some feedback. That's it.
Yeah.
With that, I've never actually I've never put that together. But
and why did you feel you needed feedback? What do you think that was? What need was that meeting?
I think because then, if maybe I needed to know what the therapist was thinking as well, because we don't know if we're not reading expression and we're thinking, oh gosh, are they thinking that I'm a bad person? Do they think I'm drunk? They're not giving me anything. I need the advice. Or so then maybe we would try and then over explain ourselves to try and get our therapist to give us something if we didn't know what they're thinking. I never actually thought about that until and I know that my last therapist, I really liked him because he was so direct with me, and he would say things maybe in a way that I'd be, oh, you're even allowed to say that. But for me, it was perfect.
Yeah.
Because he was letting me know what he thought and then could change it into, it was very much more black and white and literal.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? And I think you've said something really, really interesting there, like that you need the feedback from the counsellor. And I wonder if that might be partly because of RSD that we were talking about, like wanting to know, are you meeting me in where I need you to meet me as a counsellor, as a therapist? Are you understanding me? Like you need that feedback from that person to feel safe, like it's about safety. And for some people, it's going to be that more direct way of being, more directive way of counselling. For some people, they're going to want that more gentle way. And I think that's the whole point. Like autistic and ADHD people, we're not going to all want the same kind of therapist, the same kind of practitioner. But the whole point, and something I talk about a lot in the book, is let's collaborate with that client. And also that let's not stick to our modality in such a way. Like the idea of being a blank slate was so that the client could project onto you whatever was needed, and that would be part of the work. And I think that's a really valuable point. But for a neurodivergent person, having a blank slate in front of you, I mean, I can't think of anything more terrifying, walking into a counsellor who's just not going to say anything to me, or he's not going to welcome me, or he's not going to actively make me feel safe. And I think for me personally, for my counsellor, I need to know who they are. I don't need to know their ins and outs of their personal lives, of course, like we're not talking about that kind of disclosure, but I need to know that that person is real, is authentic, who's sitting in front of me. I need to know a bit of them before I can feel safe.
Absolutely.
And I think most neurodivergent people need that.
I know that I would only see a neurodivergent therapist as well, because we love to connect on shared experiences. So by automatically being neurodivergent, that's our shared experience, and that's how we thrive off. So that's how a lot of maybe ADHD people trauma share, or it's like, oh yeah, I've experienced that, and because we just want to relate, like our empathy, and we want people to relate to how we feel, just so they can feel understood. So that's the importance sometimes for a neurodivergent person to find their therapist.
Yeah, I agree. And I think for some neurodivergent people, they might need a neurodivergent therapist. I think for others, it's more about needing someone that gets them, needing someone that has the knowledge, that is prepared to learn, that is prepared to kind of unlearn their biases that they've brought along with them. And I think if any counsellor can do that, it doesn't have to be a neurodivergent person, neurodivergent counsellor. There's something else that you said there I thought was really important. About the kind of shared experiences, like connecting with people over shared experiences. That's something which neurodivergent people have often been misunderstood for. Oh, you interrupt, you're being rude, or you're missing the person, you've got a lack of empathy, those kind of things. Whereas actually it's a really authentic way of communicating. We do it a lot, don't we? We will jump in and sort of say these things. But but we're coming back to each other, and it's kind of a way to connect. And I think that's just an example of how many autistic ADHDers get missed and completely misunderstood.
Yeah, and you're right that it doesn't need to be the neurodivergent therapist, as long as it's one that can understand the way our brains work. Because as well, what's really important is a lot of neurodivergent. I know that it's there's a, I can't remember the percentage. It's good to look up that how many go towards a more toxic relationship because they don't understand the shame that they've suffered. And but then also we're quite contradictory. Some of our traits can be seen as narcissistic, or but they're not. It's and again you're having to explain that. So things like I can't say it, misophonia,
misophonia,
this
misophonia.
one, and there's quite a few traits where noises really irritate and make you make your blood boil.
Totally.
And it's again, people imagine the therapist didn't understand all of those that come in under the neurodivergent spectrum, is that they could be sat there and really misunderstanding, thinking that they've got a really horrible client.
Yeah.
And so it's so important to understand all of the umbrella. If we're saying we want to kill our husbands because they're making a noise, and they'll be harm to yourself,
and how you might be pathologized for that rage that you're feeling. And actually that if you understand, and in the book I talk about misophonia and those types of things, because these are things that are perfectly, like, it's completely valid. Like, this is something that in a sensory way is massively impacting your nervous system at that moment. That rage is not, it's not a conscious thing.
No.
But then if you feel shame and you feel horrible for that, like, there's so much shame that gets carried through life with that yes, you're right, as a therapist you could be sitting there going, oh my god, like, they're overreacting to this thing. But actually, hang on, let's understand the person in front of us, let's understand the client. And hopefully the book kind of brings in some of that.
Amazing.
And also, you said about abuse and toxic relationships that neurodivergent people do sadly get into proportionally more. I've got a whole chapter on trauma, which is all about the kind of more like our susceptibility to abuse, gaslighting, kind of bullying, victimization, and why that is, and some of the reasons why that is, but also the concept of neurodivergent trauma. So the idea of actually just existing in a world that's not built for us is traumatizing in itself. And that's something I think gets missed a lot by the general population, but also therapists, because actually there might be something, let's say I have had difficult experiences with going into shops and I've had miscommunications with people. I might have even had someone, if I was somebody who stimmed in public and then someone said something to me, or they thought it was being aggressive or misunderstood who I was, etc., etc. These are the kind of things that autistic and ADHD people do struggle with sometimes and have experiences of. If you've had that every time you go to the shop, then I'm going to feel incredibly anxious about going to the shops. And that is a traumatic experience. Whereas if you as a counsellor are missing that, or maybe the client doesn't even know they're neurodivergent, you might miss that, and you might be thinking, oh no, it's okay, we can deal with that discomfort, we can kind of work towards something. What are the steps that are going to get you to go into that shop? Let's challenge the irrational thoughts. They're not irrational, plainly they're not irrational. If you've had all these miscommunications, it's actually trauma. And so the chapter on trauma really breaks it down, like how we can experience neurodivergent trauma in a way that maybe isn't recognized by traditional therapeutic approaches and psychology.
Amazing. Yeah, that's so important. And again, so healing, to heal all of those years of thinking again that you were the problem, that's you. And it's really, really important. So why do you think so many therapists still really misunderstand burnout, shutdown, and or even the emotional regulation? What do you think is going on there?
Yeah, and it's certainly not intentional at all. Like, it's unintentional from counsellors and therapists, I think. But I think what tends to happen is, like, let's take a client who maybe is shutting down. They're having a shutdown because they're overwhelmed either by It might be by the therapy experience. It might be by the sensory world around them in the therapy room. It could be through something else, through emotional shutdown. They're shutting down in front of the therapist. And if the therapist is not aware of that this is a neurodivergent thing, that this is maybe sensory overload, then actually what the therapist might interpret that, and what I've heard other clients' experiences, other clients have experienced this, where the counsellor has interpreted that as resistance. It's like, oh, that person's resisting, they're reluctant to go there, they are being resistant with me, maybe, or maybe they're being just not engaging, they're not interested or whatever. And that misunderstanding just compounds the fact that probably this person in front of us has probably felt misunderstood in that way for years. Whereas actually when we understand it as a trauma response, as a perfectly understandable reaction to the sensory world around them or the way they're processing emotions, we can work with the emotional regulation with them in a way that's tailored to neurodivergent ways of being, rather than trying to fit that person into a box of this is what emotional regulation is supposed to look like, this is what expressing emotion should look like. Rather than that, we're actually tailoring it to them.
Yeah.
So I think it's things like that that can be easily misunderstood, and a counsellor might take that to their supervisor and they might discuss, oh, I think they're resistant to this, or I think this is happening, and actually there might be this other lens that needs to be looked through.
Yeah, and it's that understanding. Again, I know, for example, when we're overwhelmed or very overstimulated, I know that in the evenings, so depending on the time of day, that the therapist would have the client as well, because I know that I can have one message saying about a plan, like the next day, all the plans, you want to cancel everything because of the way you're feeling at that moment. But then everything is okay. So it's understanding that in a moment of a certain time of day, especially for neurodivergent people and the therapist as well, that everything's so much more, and we want to cancel everything, or we want to escape. And my son can't even tell me what time he's got something in the morning, because I'm like, oh my gosh, right, everything's cancelled. It's very dramatic. And now I understand, and I've let them all know that if they get these kind of messages or everything's cancelled, to ignore it.
Because that's your reaction to that overwhelm that's going on for you at the time.
And I try and say, don't message at night. But then they still do. They don't listen, but at least they're going to have to. It's again forgiving yourself for your responses.
With very understandable responses in the face of that overwhelm, right? And like you say, in therapy, somebody might be coming into that therapy room feeling completely overwhelmed by what's just gone on. They might, and that's a really interesting thing about, like, if you as a counsellor you've had to change the appointment time suddenly, and the person's used to a 10 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, and now suddenly they've had to move to a 5 p.m. on a Thursday or whatever. Understanding what that could do in terms of emotional regulation to an autistic person, an ADHD person, because we can be it can be very debilitating to have those plans change, to have to rethink all of our day. We've got things like waiting mode is something we often talk about. That idea, if you've got an appointment at 5 p.m. in the evening, okay, I can't think about anything else during the day until that appointment's happened. So that can be something that, like, is a really practical consideration for a neurodivergent client. You might say, well, what kind of time of day is better for you, if that's accessible in your business or in your agency or whatever. But we can feel so different from one moment to the next. And there's also that ADHD thing about the now and the not now. So when you're in an emotion, it can be really, really hard to understand what it's like to be out of that emotion or in a different emotion. So when I'm really, really low, like, I won't remember what happiness is like, or the other way around. Or if I'm feeling really ill, it'll be the same thing. I can't imagine ever being well. And when I'm well, I'm like, oh yeah, like everything will be fine, and I'll make all my plans based on that.
So is that a neurodivergent? Because I remember if I had a cold, I'd be like, oh, how do you even breathe? I mean, you'd forget how to breathe. I'd be like, how deep are you? And then I'd be like, oh my gosh, I think I'm going to die because you can't breathe out your nose. And so, yeah, even those kind of things, like, yeah, we are so fixated, like you said, on that feeling right then. And it is in the moment. I've never, it's really important.
And that probably, the cold thing is probably like a sensory thing too. So it could be that you're having that. I'm sure nobody likes having a stuffy nose, but maybe that's like an additional layer for you, that actually the sensory experience of not being able to breathe properly or whatever it is actually is quite another level of distressing. So it could be that too, and that becomes overwhelming. But yeah, the sort of thing that I was talking about, the now and not now, that's very much to do with time. So it's our perception of time is somewhat different to neurotypical people, and how we can lose 3 hours hyper focusing on something small, but equally we might like not understand the concept of what 5 minutes is.
Yes,
those kind of things. It's linked to that. So that kind of, and emotions can be seen in the same way. We can be just in the emotion and not be able to think of anything else.
Yeah, and that's again something, a huge thing for people, therapists to learn, and so they can help the client understand themselves so much more.
Yeah.